Greetings! Here's a video which I'm going to compare the Rigol MSO5000 scope with the Siglent SDS2000X Plus scope. These two scopes are roughly in the same ballpark, direct competitors. Once you add up things like the various options that you might put in there and compare the bandwidths. They're both 4-channel scopes, although the Siglent is available in a 2-channel version. But for the purpose of this, I'm comparing the 4-channel scopes. These scopes were bought with the base bandwidth, so there's a 70 megahertz version here and a 100 megahertz version here. And full disclosure, I have been a bit of a Rigol fanboy in the past, and for my field scope for some years now, I've used an MSO 1074Z-S, which is still a pretty good scope, and it's a nice compact scope, and in fact in comparison to these are actually pretty big in comparison, so I'm not so sure these are going to be the replacement for it. However, there's some quite a lot of things have happened since the old MSO 1074Z, the Rigol, that old Rigol, and I'm just going to describe some of the benefits of these new scopes and also some of the pitfalls which you've got. Now you'll see here that I've got set up a couple of sine waves. They're 90 degrees out of phase from each other, and they're supplied by the Rigol. And this Rigol, when I purchased it, came with a whole bunch of bundled options, which included things like the signal generator, all the serial decodes, etc., etc. And the only thing that wasn't part of the bundle was bandwidth upgrade. Now there's a way that you can, if you want to, you can pop around to the EV blog and have a look to see how people have managed to get around some of those restrictions, and I'm not going to describe it in this video here. And similarly with the SDS2000X Plus, not to be confused with a couple of other Siglent models that are named very similarly, the SDS2000X Plus, which you'll see here, 2000X Plus. This is the base model of this one, well, the 4 channels anyway, and it comes in at 100 megahertz. And one of the big things that I noticed about these, and one of the reasons why I actually initially sort of thought, well, the Rigol looks quite interesting, because it's got a sticker spec of 8 gigasamples per second, which is unheard of in a scope of this price range. I mean, this starts for the 4-channel version at just under $1,000 US, as opposed to this one that was 70 megahertz for that one. This 100 megahertz version starts at $1,400 US, although that does come with the basic serial decodes. So that means the UART, I2C and SPI. But we'll just show you a couple of things that first spring to mind when I saw this. And I'm not sure if you can see it on here, but this is quite a noisy signal here, and in comparison to what you get in the Siglent. And the reason why I'm showing you this particular thing with two sine waves, which are 90 degrees apart, is so that we can have a quick look and see what this looks like if we put it into XY mode. And oh, that's not exactly 90 degrees apart. Let's see if we can align the phase. There we go, that's it. So you'll see this is okay, but it's quite a thick line going on here. So let's try it on the Siglent. Let's see if we can move this to XY mode. And you see this is a much thinner circle, so coming off of the same signal generator, and we're getting a completely different result. So I did some tests on this, and in fact this is only the Rigol scope is only coming up with around about 5 bits of effective resolution, compared to about 6.5, 7 bits of effective resolution on the both of these are on the 8-bit setting. So that's kind of a bit disappointing. Not something which I was really expecting. So we'll have a little further look and see if we can do anything with this. Now, the first thing I sort of thought about was, well, you know, maybe this has just got a quite a large memory depth. And you can change the memory depth, and you'll see it looks a little bit more grainy here and whatnot. But you'll also notice that in the XY time-based mode, it doesn't really seem to be operating with the intensity gradient, so it just seems to have some persistence on there, so I'm not really quite sure what's going on there. But if we go back into sort of normal time-based mode, and the same here, this is an annoyance on this. If I press the acquire button on the Siglent, you'll notice I don't know, I couldn't find anywhere on here where I could switch to XY mode. I was fiddling around for ages trying to figure out where is the XY mode on here, but I have to go to the acquire menu here to be able to select XY mode. Another little thing on the user interface while we're at it is you'll notice that the Rigol, what it does is when you put up a menu, it covers up the rest of the display and it's not transparent. I may be wrong, but I don't think there's a way to make it transparent like you can on things like the some of the tech scopes and possibly others as well. So that just completely hides it. It's a common feature of the Rigol is that when menus and stuff come up, they just cover up the waveform itself, so you can't see anything. Whereas in the Siglent, you'll notice if I bring up the acquire menu, it squashes everything in. So that's an interesting little snippet, and you can turn off them by just pushing that there. The other thing I'll say is that neither of them, from the point of view of doing touch gestures, are very good. And by touch gestures, I mean more than just selecting a menu item with your finger. As soon as you start doing this, you'll see it's a bit laggy. And also, if you wanted to change the time, well, there you go. You see, this to me is just useless. I've got no idea why you'd want to do this way. This is what buttons are for. There we go. Managed to get it back. Oh, switch it off. So, and the same applies to the time base. It's okay for this kind of thing, and I think actually the Rigol's even worse. There you go. I think I'd rather just, you know, use the buttons. One thing I noticed also with the Rigol, and this for me was a selling point, was that the channel settings are all independent, unlike on the Siglent, where you have to press a button and then make the changes, and the active channel is the one that's lit up, and you can tell the channels that are actually on are down here. So it's a little bit slightly confusing at first, but the active channel is the one that's lit up, and the actual channels that are on are written down here. One other thing which I think is a common fault with the Rigol is it may be that it comes out in the video okay, but I think Dave Jones in his EV blog sort of review stroke teardown of this note mentioned this as well, is that you can't really see if this is on or not. If I turn it off and turn it on, it might come up in the video okay. It's actually quite difficult to see. So I do the run stop, I can see the red here, but I can't really see the yellowy green that's underneath there. So I'm not sure if maybe one day if I take it apart, I'll change the resistor on the LED or change the LED itself, but it's not very good. So one of the things, as I say, the noise thing was really the first thing that jumped out of me on this. It's not great. And another thing which came up was that, and this is actually a reason why I was sort of umming and ahhing about the Rigol, is that there's no readout. Now, what the probe readout is you'll notice on the Siglent there's this like gold thing around here, and that allows you to plug in probes which have got their attenuation setting encoded in them, and all it is a little resistor inside the BNC connector, or inside the BNC itself. But now you can expect it with the Rigol. The probes that come with the Rigol, I think they're 300 megahertz probes, even though it's only a 70 meg scope, with the idea that you'll purchase the bandwidth upgrade, and so bear that in mind. But of course there's no probe readout. Now the probes that came with this 100 megahertz version, I think with the 200 megahertz version it's the same. They're 200 meg probes, but they don't have a readout. I believe if you go straight for the 350 megahertz version of the Siglent scope, the probes that come with that do have the readout functionality. And what that readout functionality does is you'll see the attenuation on here. It means that normally when you have usual probes connected, they're normally 10 times probes, so normally you'd have that set. So this is the setting that I have right now is actually unusual because for me anyway, I would normally only ever have 10 times probes on. This is just for demonstration purposes here. But the probes are okay, there's nothing special about them, except what I should mention is that the on the Rigol ones, and this is the same with the MSO1074Z, there's a switch on the probe itself, and I'll just get one out here, I've got one behind me. Is this the one? Yes. There's in fact, here's exactly what happens. So first of all, you can barely see whether it's on times 10 or times 1. I think it's on times 1 right now. No, it is on. Well, you can hardly read it. And secondly, it's very, very easy, particularly when you're adjusting the probe clip. It's very easy for this to slip and go into times 1 mode, or even halfway in between. Then you think, oh, hang on a second, I can't see anything. So it's not a great design. That doesn't feel positive when it's switching between the times 10 and whatever. I mean, normally I just leave them in times 10 all the time. And I think with the MSO1074Z that I have a vague recollection that I kind of super glued them because I got fed up with them changing all the time. So they're permanently stuck at times 10. Because to be honest with you, I can't actually ever remember using a times 10 probe in times 1 mode in recent times. I do have some specific times 1 probes that I use for that scenario. This is another irritation. So if I press, this happens on both of these scopes, darned irritating. So if I happen to know that I'm using times 10 probes, so oops, what I'm doing, there we go, I'll do it the same on here. Oops, there we go. Set the attenuation to 10 times, and I'll go ahead and I'll set it on all of the things because I know that I'm going to do that. So I'll set it, diligently set it to 10 times. See, this is an irritation of this. It seems to be an ongoing joke with Rigols, is that they don't seem to be very good at doing their this one's already got it. Okay, so I think we're all set for 10 times. Oh no, that one isn't. Obviously missed that one. 10 times. Okay, so there's 10 times. I'll do the same with this one. Probe 10 times. 3. Probe 10 times. 4. Probe 10 times. Great. And you think, superb, that's set. And typically for me, I'll just leave the probes just plugged in all the time, unless for me that is the default. But then if you go and press the default button and accept it, it resets all of the probe settings. So irritating. Same on the Siglent. Of course, if you've got probes with readback on them, it's not a problem. But I just found it an irritation. So what I've done is I have a setup which has got a few things on which I use. So there we go. Load up that. And same on the Rigol as well. I've got a setup which which is my number 1. Oops. Recall, internal, recall. So that's the way I deal with that. So you'll see that all of my probe attenuations are set to 10 times. And there's one other thing on here which I've also got in my defaults, which is a bit of a thing of mine. Normally when you're in, if I go into the default here, I'll do it on here as well. And let's turn on something. Let's put on a nice sine wave. Now, by default, There we go. Let's get it on both of these. Yeah. There we go. This is a personal choice thing here. The expansion point, so when I change the bandwidth, the expansion point is always at this point here. Now most of the stuff that I do, which I should be clear about, is mixed signal stuff, and I actually prefer to have the expansion point towards the left hand side. Now there's an option on things like tech scopes. You can set it to 10%, which means just at this expansion point just here, and the same applies to key sites. You can set the left expansion point to 10%. So pretty much when I do my load my setup, it's on here, there it goes, load, and I'll do that on here as well, recall, internal recall. You'll see that my expansion point is just here. So if I now turn on our wave and we make it so that we can actually see it, there we go. See that, in fact, if I change the trigger so it's down here, when I actually expand it, you'll see it's expanding around this point here rather than expanding in the middle. And one of the real irritating things is that if the expansion point's in the middle on the Rigol, is that you so often have these darned menus in the way and it hasn't compressed it. Whereas on the Siglent, you see the expansion points there, but because what's happened with the menus on it's compressed the screen, so you can still see everything on there, nothing's hidden. You can still get rid of the menu, of course, and then it expands out. So that's a little thing which I like to use, is being able to use the expansion point at 10%. But it's a personal choice thing. Then you've got the frequency readout. It's a bit small on the Siglent, but it seems to always be there, and it's 7 digits. It's awesome, and it's pretty darned accurate as well. So let's see if we can. You can also, of course, get a frequency readout on the Rigol as well. But it's, again, it just takes up so much screen real estate, and it's just, you know, I don't want it to. I'm not sure if it's possible just to, you know, have it somewhere where it's less intrusive. So it's also, you can also set it on here. I think it goes up to a maximum of 6. Yeah, goes up to a maximum of 6 digits. There have been some comparisons of the screen and how glary they are. The Siglent is nice. It's definitely not glary. The Rigol can be a bit glary, but I've seen worse. So it's a 6 of one, half of the other, really. I mean, certainly I prefer the Siglent. I mean, it is a bigger screen, as you can see. I'm going to make a comment about the LAN as well. On the Rigol, there seems to be something wrong with the LAN settings. This firmware, by the way, is 1.03.00.01 on the Rigol. And when I plug in the LAN with its default settings, it seemed to go crazy and send all sorts of stuff over the LAN. And the only way I've managed to connect it is to use a static IP address. And when I set it, I then have to power cycle the scope in order for it to seem to take properly. Whereas the Siglent, no problem at all. I just went in there and let it do, set it to DHCP, and away we go. So that was a far better experience on the Siglent compared to the Rigol. There doesn't seem to be a horizontal vernier on the, as far as I can tell, on the Siglent. Now this might be operator error, but I haven't been able to find it. You can do this on the Rigol, which is a nice feature. Sometimes if you just want to have things so they just fit nicely on the screen, it's nice to be able to do that. See, again, it's stupid frequency things just getting in the way. And I'm just going to mention, probably the most irritating thing is on this scope is that as soon as you change the time base, the whole scope stops for about a second. And it's not just the time base either. If I start moving You see it there. If I move things, it's just, the whole scope just completely stops. Same thing if I move the vertical. It just, the whole scope just seems to stop for about a second. Whereas if you look at the, let's do it on here. It's immediate on the Siglent. I mean, why is this? Why does it just stop? I don't understand. Look, it's just does nothing. If I do it again, why? I don't understand. Why does it take so long to recover? I mean, this is almost instantaneous. I mean, it's certainly nothing that would concern me. So that sort of sluggishness at in that particular instance is actually a little bit irritating, to be honest with you, and not what I was expecting. If you look at the old MSO1074Z that I've got, it doesn't, you know, it's similar to this sort of response. You know, it's immediate, but on here it's, what's it doing? What are we waiting for? It's strange. Don't understand. Oh, I should mention as well that the Siglent doesn't appear to have any video out. The Rigol's got an HDMI out. However, it seems to have, in the version of firmware I have, it has 3 resolutions, none of which are the native resolution of the screen itself, which is 1024 by 600. Actually, both of these screens are 1024 by 600, in case you're interested. This one's a 9-inch and this one's a 10-inch, so to give you some idea of the comparison there. But yeah, if you operate them in the lower resolutions, the text just looks, it does fill the screen, but the text is mushy because it's downsampled. If you run it at the highest resolution setting, which I think is 1280 by 720, it has borders around. So basically what it's done is it's taken the screen itself and then stuck borders around it. So none of the options are particularly good, but I just thought I'd mention that. But you know, say the Siglent doesn't have any video out at all, so there you go. That might be of use to you or not, I don't know. And one other thing which I've found sort of handy is that you can use an external keyboard and mouse with the Siglent. Although with the Rigol only the mouse works. So just so you're aware of that. Okay, so I've got the LAs connected up now. So this is what the, if I lift up the demo board here, you can see I've actually got both of them plugged in. I made a little adapter here so that we could have both of them plugged in. This one is one of the LA probes from the Siglent. They're not cheap, these probes. And I think on the EV blog there's a bunch of people actually making up their own, but the SPL2016, which is for the SDS2000X, is $369. It's listed out, and if you want to pay for the option, it's another $169. So it's $369 for the hardware, $169 for the actual to open it up. As I mentioned, you can always go to EEV blog and figure out how you can open up the software option yourself, but the hardware you're either going to have to build or buy. And the same goes for the Rigol probe. That is $399, and for the PLA 2216. And similarly, you know, EV blog members are looking at seeing how they can make their own ones up, because it is quite expensive. However, there's no additional cost for the to open up the license, as I understand it. So please correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's just a hardware purchase. Now, one thing I should note is that the sampling rate on the Rigol is 1 gigasample per second on the LA, and the sampling rate on the Siglent is only 500 megasamples a second. So that's half the sampling rate on there. So what I'm going to do is I set up to some signals on the board there, and I'm just going to have a quick look and we'll see if we can set up. Now, the first thing is I prefer to have them this way round, so you can switch them which way round the channels go, and I'm going to switch on and off, so I don't want any of those ones, and we'll switch off. We only want the I2C one, so I haven't figured out a way of just, if I have a vague recollection, if I switch off D7 to Z0, it just switches the whole LA off, so you have to sort of do it like that. So that's the first one, and we'll do the same thing on the Siglent as well. This comes up in what I call what my preferred way up, if you like. Now what I did find was that the logic settings by default are set to TTL. I have it in my sort of special default reload, which I load up. I have it set to 3.3 volts, so it's a little bit better than the TTL. The Rigol, as I remember, actually defaults to the 3.3 volt CMOS thresholds. So channels, we don't want D8 to D15. On this one we can switch them all off and then just select the channels you want, so slightly better, but you don't seem to be able to do it from the control panel here. I may be wrong, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. You have to do it from the touch screen, so keep that in mind. Okay, and we don't need the analog channel for what we're going to do here, so we'll switch that off. There we go. But what we do want to do is we want to do a trigger. So if I just do a trigger, and what we'll do to begin with, we'll just do a trigger on D0 on the falling edge. Oops, it's D0 falling edge, and same thing on here, setup, source, digital. Again, it seemed to have to go. I seem to have to do everything from the touch screen. I don't seem to be able to do anything on the control panel here to be able to select those. So that's a good start. Let's now switch it so that we do an I2C decode on there. So okay, set the decode, bus type, I2C. Oh, this is Rigol again. It just likes to overshoot, doesn't it? When just as I'm pushing the button, press that so it actually shows it. And we need to set the sources. So, oops, D0. There we go. D1. There we go. And there we have the channel decode going on there. If I go back and fiddle the trigger, so the trigger is actually an I2C trigger rather than just an edge one. Go to I2C. I think there's a way of copying the trigger from copying the I2C settings from the trigger to the decode, or the other way around, but I didn't do that in this case. Okay, so we've got a trigger on the starting. Now I happen to know that in addition there is a 10-bit address we can trigger on here, which there you go, 10-bit address. Now this is crazy. As far as I can work out, you can't put in a hex address. Now I happen to know that the address is 102 in hex, which is 258, of course, in decimal. And you know, that's, come on, give me a break, will you? I'm just going to reset the position here because it looks like it's way off to the left. There we go. And for some reason we're looking in the middle here. We're triggering in the middle, but you'll see that it's got 102 is the address that it's looking at right there. So I've got to try to remember how we did this, because there was a way to do this, to set it to the left hand side, and I can't remember what it was. Okay, let's not do that right now. Right, okay, let's do this one. Let's set this to the decode and everything. Okay, so what we could do here is actually set it up so we go straight into doing an I2C trigger. Serial trigger, I2C, signal, SCL, digital D0, SDA, digital D1, Return. Can't if you had to do anything in here. Oh yeah, so here we've got sort of already set up. So I had it set up for 102 address and data, and if we return, why are we not seeing it? Oh, it's just the trigger, isn't it? So the trigger's there, working. If I expand it a little bit, so you can see the expansion point on this is where I want it to be, just here. For some reason it's reset the expansion point up there. I'm sure I'll figure that out in a moment. Come to me. Okay, let's set up the decode. So bus operation, protocol signals. These look like they've been remembered from the last time. And protocol config. Oh yeah, look, you can do protocol copy from trigger. Very nice. And you'll see here it's decoded 102. If we zoom a long way out, and we don't zoom too far out, we can also do things like stop, and then zoom in. Oops, and you can see there that it will decode what's in there, and you can, oops, I'm going to change in the wrong. This is one thing I found with it, when you're going between scopes like this, you end up getting a little bit confused. Oh, one thing I do like, although it's getting in the way a little bit here, is when you do changes on the scope on this Siglent, is that it comes up here and tells you what you've done. That's kind of quite nice. Now I'm going to show you something which you can't do on here, which is really, really irritating, and that's that you can't use the search function on the Siglent. This is crazy. So if you can use the search function, but you can't search for I2C, which is crazy. So you'll see here you've got mode, which you search for, but there's only basic analog functions. There are no functions to be able to do searches for things like an I2C address or data or anything serial at all, which I found a little bit. I had to look in the manual to check that that was right, and it wasn't operator error. Now, interestingly, on the Rigol you can do this, and you'll see there's the option to do it. There you go, and you can set it up, but you can only do it on analog channels. What's that about? So I have tested it, it does work, but it's things like this that just make me think I haven't really thought this through very well. Anyway, I'm going to just leave it there, because I've probably gone through the things which I've found which are, you know, good and bad and indifferent. Oh, there was one other thing which I should mention, and that's that if you're in the LA, I'm going to just switch the trigger here to be an edge again. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a long way. Okay, you can see here, I don't know why, so we're triggering on D0, which is the red thing here. It's always 1 nanosecond delayed. I have no idea why, but even on high-speed signals I've done, it's always 1 nanosecond delayed on the trigger. I don't know why, you just have to keep it in mind. And would be okay is if you could do some skew adjustment. The Rigol doesn't have any skew adjustment as far as I've been able to ascertain. The Siglent does. The Siglent has skew adjustment on both digital and analog channels. Okay, so I think I'll leave it there. I'm just having a quick look through my notes to see if there's anything else that I might have missed, but I think I've covered everything that I'm aware of so far. All in all, both of them are amazing bits of kit for what you're getting for the money. I mean, my MSO1074Z, I think when I bought that, when it was loaded with the signal generator, it had a two-channel signal generator like this one. The Siglent, by the way, only has one. uh, and the logic analyzer. I think that probably wasn't much difference in price to this, although once I had to spend 300 and whatever dollars on this, it did update the price a bit. But on the other hand, you're getting a whole load of additional functionality which you didn't have, particularly on the bandwidth. If you're prepared to go and pop over to EV blog on both of these scopes, you can figure out how to up the bandwidth. On the Rigol, I think it goes to 350 megahertz. It's either 300 or 350. On the Siglent, the steps are 200. So 100 is a base, then 200, then 350, and then 500. Now, supposedly there isn't an advertised upgrade from 350 to 500 if you've upgraded from a 100 or 200 meg scope. Although on this one, I did manage to upgrade it all the way up to 500 megahertz. And I'm just going to mention one other little thing, if you start using more than one, if you start using channel 1 and 2 on here, you need to be aware of aliasing issues because the sampling rate drops down to 1 gigasample per second. And if you start sticking in frequencies that are beyond about 430 megahertz, things start to look a little bit nasty. To such an extent where you'll get an incorrect frequency count here. So it'll start mirroring back on itself. So in other words, a 580 megahertz signal will show up as 420 megahertz because of the Nyquist and all that good stuff. But as I say, from point of view of value for money, both of these scopes are great. If you're going to ask me which one I'd purchase if I was only going to have one, it's really hard. I mean, the read back's kind of handy, although it's not supplied. You know, with the base units aren't supplied with read back probes. I think that the UI experience on the Siglent is so far ahead of the UI experience on the MSO5000. I'm just going to have to say I'm going to go for the Siglent, and that's despite the fact that, you know, historically I've been a bit of a Rigol fanboy. This, although it's only been out for 3 months, is a far more polished machine than the Rigol, which has been out for 20 months. I honestly, I'm sure there are things that they could do on this Rigol to improve it, but I'm not sure if the front end is recoverable. It's so noisy. But as I say, just from a UI perspective, the Siglent beats the Rigol. I mean, yes, the LA on here is 1 gigasample per second compared to 500 megasamples per second. Possibly, you know, it's one of the banner specs I looked at and I thought, yeah, I'd definitely prefer a 1 gigasample per second thing. The frequency counter on here, superb, awesome, 7-digit frequency counter. The fact there's no video out on here, that may or may not be a deal breaker for you. I don't know. The no horizontal vernier on here, not a big deal. Many scopes don't. Even reasonably, you know, expensive tech scopes. I've got an MDO4000 here that doesn't have a vernier on the horizontal scale. Oh yeah, there was one other little thing. You noticed that these don't line up. I just thought, how hard could it be? They don't line up with the buttons. I actually find myself using the buttons probably more than the screen. It's possibly because I'm doing this behind a camera that you may see me using the screen a bit more. The fact that these menus keep covering up what's being displayed, whereas, you know, if you have something on here, it squishes things up to make sure that you can still see everything on the display. I much prefer this. Hugely much prefer this to this way. Tech does a similar thing here, where, you know, the menus start coming up and hiding things. However, you can set them to be transparent. I don't believe there's a way of setting these to transparent. See if there's anything else on here. Yeah, doing any kind of gestures on the screen on both of these is useless, to be honest with you. You're much better off using the panel devices on here. One thing that's quite nice over the old MSO1074Z is that you've got your on-screen keyboard, which is reasonably good. I quite like that. That does work quite well, unlike the gestures. Yeah, the LAN on here, as I mentioned, the DHCP doesn't work on the version of firmware I'm on. And looking at my notes, I think that's it. So thanks ever so much for watching, and look forward to any comments you might have. Cheers now.